Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I'm Angelia and today I bring to you a haunted video. I'm going to talk about ghosts in literature and I'm going to present some books that I think are a good assortment of books that are, some of them are fun, some of them are challenging, some of them are meant to be spooky, some of them are not, but yet they are infused with ghostly activity. So these are just some of my favorite books that happen to feature ghosts. You can let me know in the comments if you also like some of these books or if you have some other ghostly recommendations, because I like a little touch of the creepy in my reading now and again. So please let me know if you know some other ones that I should check out. So yesterday when I was getting ready to make this video, I was looking up, kind of organizing what order I wanted to do them in and looking up a few facts and details. And it was the first cool day around here that we have had since, I don't know, like last February or March. And by cool, I mean below 90 degrees. So yesterday was in the 80s and it was raining. So we got all excited and like opened all the windows and stuff. So I'm sitting there reading about these ghost books and all of a sudden the wind picks up and the doors begin slamming, like the bathroom door is slamming open and shut and the cups are skittering across the counters. And Stephen comes out, he's like, what is going on in here? And I'm just like, it's the ghosts. So today's even better though. Today's like in the 60s and I know it's not going to last, but it's just like super exciting. We were running around trying to find socks and things like that. But that's how it goes down here in Texas. So let's talk about some ghostly books. And I'm starting with the oldest one in the pile. And that is Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Here's my two editions. I have this really old one that I got at a library book sale when I was a teenager. And this is the copy that I've read a number of times. And it has the Christmas Carol and several other Christmas stories. And then more recently, I received a box set of Dickens, the Penguin Cloth-Bound Classic. So I have this nice pretty one. And I like the way that the book begins. This was published, I don't know if I got that note here. Let's see. Oh, in 1843. And the original title was A Christmas Carol in Prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. And I did read that when he first published this, it came out in the holiday season, and by Christmas Eve, the whole first run of it was completely sold out. And the book has never gone out of print. So its popularity has grown over the years, and even people that don't really read a lot of literature or Charles Dickens are familiar with the story of the Christmas Carol because it's been made into so many movies, plays, stage adaptations, musicals, parodies, every kind of format. And so even, school kids kind of know the basic premise of the story. And I think one of the reasons is that it's pretty family friendly, even though it has ghosts in it. And the theme is not that difficult to understand and accept. Basically that Ebenezer Scrooge, a mean old tightwad, is visited by three ghosts right before Christmas, preceded by the ghost of his old business partner and fellow tightwad, Jacob Marley. And he basically is shown his past, his present, and his future if he doesn't make any changes in his hard-hearted ways. And the theme of redemption and having it's never too late to improve and have a second chance and to see what good you might, put out into the world. All of that's very appealing to people, especially in the holiday times. So I like the very opening of the book, and it gives a little hint of that humor that comes up in Dickens quite frequently. And the very first paragraph reads, Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. So we're establishing right there that this was definitely a ghost, and The scene when Marley first appears to him and has to explain why he's there and that Scrooge is really seeing who he thinks he's seeing has always stuck in my imagination. And I love the explanation of all of the chains and money purses that he has to drag around with him when he walks. Scrooge says, "You are fettered. Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" Scrooge trembled more and more. "Or would you know," perused the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full and heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." So I've always loved those lines, that basically you wear the chains that you have forged in life. So that's my opener here, and I think that The Christmas Carol is a great first place to read Dickens. It's great to read at Christmas time. It's great to read at Victober time. It's great to read for spooky season, and it's pretty family friendly if you want to share Dickens with school-age kids. So that's my opener there. The ghosts aren't too terribly scary, although they freak Scrooge out because he wasn't expecting them to come and sit in his bedroom for 3 nights. All right, so moving on. Let's look at the cheat sheet. The second one I want to talk about is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo. I'm going to talk about a few that are definitely intended to be creepy, like ones that you might enjoy if you were looking for something fun to read because Halloween is nearby. So that's my next little run of books here. So Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo was published in 2019. There is a sequel coming out in 2023. I wish that the gap wasn't quite that long because I'm going to have to go back and either reread this book or do some serious perusals of a summary. But basically, Ninth House, which I thought that the copy that I had was mine, and then my family refreshed my memory that I'd actually given this book to my daughter and it was her book, even though all of us read it. And the last time she was here, she took it back because she is really into that dark academia kind of theme and look, and she wanted that in her apartment along with some other of her more, I don't know, there's like an aesthetic, I don't know. Anyway, she took it back. But Ninth House is mostly set at Harvard. What happens in this story, there's a girl named Galaxy Stern. She goes by Alex. And Alex is the age at which you would go to college, but she wasn't really on the pathway for that because she was living a very hard life. She was associating with a lot of drug users, and she is the sole survivor at a very terrible homicide scene. In the hospital, she is approached by somebody who tells her that she has been selected for her wonderful potential to receive this scholarship to Harvard. Now, of course, this is not a no strings attached situation, and it turns out that they want her to monitor or look into these secret houses that are at Harvard. And there really are, some of these really do exist, but in the story there is a ninth house somewhere that they feel is practicing some dark and forbidden magic. The reason that Alex was particularly selected is because she can see ghosts. And if you imagine the age of Harvard and the city there, that she sees a lot of ghosts, all from all different times of history. And she does also learn how to actually communicate and find out what they want to say. So that is the premise, and I can't tell too much more about it without giving away a lot of things. But she meets some people. Some turn out to be true friends. Some people are false friends. There's several mysteries. It's very suspenseful. It's scary. It's a little gory. It's not a young adult novel like some of the author's other works. It's an adult novel, although it does have an appeal for older teens as well, because it has to do with basically an 18-year-old girl starting college. And it's a lot of fun. And when you get to the end, it's definitely left wide open with a bunch of unsolved things for the next book. We all read it around the household, and then we're like, oh, when's the next book going to come out? And now, it's like 3-4 years later, and we're like, please put the next book out. So that's a fun read. Also, along those lines, let's see, another book that has to do, like, these next two books also have to do with like creepy schools, but we have Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This one, don't be put off by the size. It actually moves along very quickly. It's not a slogger. And this book is, I think I talked about this in a video I did about fun mysteries. There is a mystery. There's a couple of different time periods. Basically, in this story, it's a little complicated, but let me see if I can sum it up quickly. There is, in the past, like around the turn of the 20th century, there was a girls' boarding school, and two girls at the school fall in love with each other, and they're also really obsessed with this author who's kind of a daring and provocative woman who is writing books that the parents, they want it banned. It's scandalous. It's giving their girls the wrong ideas. So they form a society called the Plain Bad Heroines, and kind of to celebrate this author, but also to kind of have an excuse to be sneaking around and, making out and stuff like that. So, but these girls are found tragically dead with a copy of the book nearby. And after that, several other mysterious deaths occur. And at the beginning of this book, there's this very, very brief summary of that says, it's a terrible story, and one way to tell it is this: two girls in love and a fog of wasps cursed the place forever after. Now, what you get here is a couple of different stories. You get the story in the past about the school, the founders of the school, and the curse, and the mysterious events that occur. And then you get a current time story about a very young author who has written a kind of a history of the place, kind of a new look at it, that's sort of a queer feminist history of this school and the mystery, and that is being made into a movie. You have the stars of the movie, the producer, the director, and they get to the set, and mysterious things continue to occur at the site of this school. So we're going back and forth in time between all the weird things that have happened in the past and the present, and it's creepy, mysterious, it's very queer, so it has a lot of good elements for different things you might be looking for in a spooky book, and it's got humor. So at the end, it's one of those ones where it's not 100% resolved about what was real, what was supernatural, what was manufactured, and you get the two stories. You get an old, creepy, gothic story from like 1902, and you get a contemporary story. There's also like a couple of romance stories in there. It's a really good mashup of a lot of different genres, and a really fun book. So I recommend Plain Bad Heroines. Then also along those lines, another book that I read that has to do with a creepy old girls' school was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This book was published in 2018. And in this story, there's also the double storyline. It takes place in Vermont, and part of the story is about things that happened in 1950 when it was a school for troubled girls. Like girls who had could not toe the line at home, or gotten into various kinds of trouble, been kicked out of other schools, are kind of together at this school. And there is a disappearance, and then the school eventually closed, and it's kind of in ruins, but somebody in the current day has bought it and wants to renovate it. and it is supposedly haunted. Then we have a young woman in contemporary times named Fiona. Her own sister disappeared a number of years ago, and the mystery. Well, she didn't disappear. I think actually she was found dead, but the mystery was never solved of her murder. So she is interested in finding out what actually happened to her sister because she's grown up to be a journalist, and she also becomes interested in what has happened at that school. And there's definitely a ghost. And does the ghost want to help her or cause trouble? You have to read to find out. But there are family secrets, secrets of the town, old story, the new story, ghosts, atmosphere, a lot of stuff like that. Again, you can tell I like books with like multiple time periods or multiple narrators and stuff like that. So another one along those lines is The Broken Girls. Next book I want to talk about is actually a young adult novel, and it is a historical fiction novel, but it's also a ghost story. And this one's kind of bridging me between ones that are just intended to be spooky and creepy versus literary books that happen to have a ghost. So this is kind of my bridge entry in that category. And this book is called 13 Doorways, Wolves Behind Them All by I forgot to write down the author, but I'm going to put it on the screen. This was a young adult. Oh, I know. It's Laura Ruby. Never mind. I do know the author. This is an author who writes young adult and children's books. And in my former life as an elementary school librarian, I did have several of her books in our library. They were kind of for older elementary students, and they were really good fantasy books. But this book is historical fiction, but it's also a ghost story. And guess what? There's two time periods again. So in this story, we have a family. There's three kids, Frankie and her younger brother and sister, and they get dropped off at an orphanage in Chicago by their father. They're not actually orphans, but their mother passes away, and their father is kind of strung out, and he said, not sure what to do, and he's, well, I need to put you here temporarily because I can't take care of you. Got to get it together, get a job, etc., and then I'll come back and I'll get you. So the kids think that they are there temporarily, and this is in I don't know, Depression era. So this is happening around the Depression time, and then as they get older, it kind of goes up through World War II. And so, but what happens is he ends up meeting a new woman, and he ditches them. He finds a new wife, and she's not interested in taking on these extra kids, and so he never collects them from the orphanage. So they are growing up, and the brother is separated into the boys section, and then Frankie and her sister are in the girls section. And there's another story, and that's the story of Pearl. Her story really takes place about 20 years earlier, around the time of World War I. And Pearl is a ghost who is at this school, and she watches over the girls. She listens to them. She's thinking about them, but she becomes particularly interested in Frankie. And the more that she follows Frankie, the more of her own story comes out. It's as if she is so intangible that she's kind of forgotten her own past. And as she becomes more and more interested in Frankie, she becomes more and more concrete to herself as she begins to remember her own story. It's a ghost story, but it's not like scary ghosts. Pearl very much wants to help Frankie, but she, of course, is, she's a ghost. She doesn't have any substance. And it's really beautifully written. What's kind of funny is Stephen and I both read this book, but I had totally forgotten about it. And when I told him I was putting together this video, he said, oh, well, what about that book that we read? And then he goes, oh, it was really good. And there was a girl and there was a ghost. And it took the two of us. We had to just dig down into the the rusty wells of our middle-aged memories to remember this book. And we finally started remembering the characters and their names and what happened in the book. And then we look it up and it's 2019 and we're like, why does this feel like something we read 15 years ago? So my theory is we probably read it in 2020, and you know, anything that you read during like the spring and summer of 2020, I mean, sometimes some of it seems like it was yesterday, some of it seems like it was 20 years ago. Like that was like the strangest time. And I don't know, my brain, I thought my brain was working okay, but really it wasn't. And right now I'm distracted because there is a dog in my backyard and we do not have a dog. And there's like a pretty good sized dog and he's running all around in my backyard. So I'm gonna have to check on that in a minute. All right, but the video must go on. All right, so the next book that I want to talk about, we're moving into some that are really different in tone. And this next one is a book that I have really loved from this year called The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. And I know a lot of you have read this. If you have not read it yet, it is like one of my favorites, and it'll be in my top 10 list of the year. Now, some people did not love it as much as I did. I've seen a lot of people talking about it on BookTube, that some people did love it. Some people liked it, but didn't love it or didn't think it was her best book. My husband would be one of those, but I thought it was one of her best books, and I loved it. Like the minute it ended, I wanted to start it again. And I love the story. Tookie, the main character, is one of my favorite characters of all time and definitely of this year. I love the book list in the back. But basically, it's the story of Tookie, a woman, an indigenous woman in Minneapolis who has been incarcerated. The story of what happened to her that ended her in jail is very Elmore Leonard-esque and just kind of nutso. But it's one of the charms of the story is reading how she came to be in prison. When she gets out of prison, she gets a job at a bookstore that happens to be the bookstore that Louise Erdrich has in Minneapolis. And she is in the story in a minor role because it takes place, a lot of it does take place in the bookstore. And there is a customer of the bookstore named Flora. And Flora, this is the description of Flora in life. Flora was a devoted reader, a passionate book collector. Our specialty is native books, of course, her main interest. But here comes the annoying part. She was a stalker of all things indigenous. Maybe stalker's too harsh a word. Let's just say instead she was a very persistent wannabe. So Flora was a white woman who was completely infatuated with indigenous culture. And Flora dies, but she doesn't leave. So this is the description of Flora's presence in the bookstore near the beginning of the story. 5 days after Flora died, she was still coming to the bookstore. I'm still not strictly rational. How could I be? I sell books. Even so, I found the truth of this hard to accept. Flora came in when the store was empty, always on my shift. She knew our slow hours. The first time this happened, I had just learned the sad news and I was easily rattled. I heard her murmuring and then rustling about on the other side of the tall bookshelves in fiction, her favorite section. So that's an ongoing theme, that they can hear Flora's clothing and her jewelry as she putters around, and sometimes she's a little bit destructive and throws things on the floor. But only Tookie and I think a couple other of the women that work there are privy to hearing Flora's disturbances. Most of the other employees, they believe that she is there, but they can't perceive her. And that's another thing I love in the story is nobody doubts Tookie or says that she's nuts or anything. They're quite concerned when she tells them about the haunting, and they want to help, but nobody disbelieves it. And so a lot of other, this book has so much going on. There's so many things, and I've talked about it in other videos. But I'm really focusing on ghosts in this one, so I'm not going to get into all the reasons why this is such a wonderful book. But at the heart, there is Flora's ghost and the question of whether or not a particular sentence in a book she was reading caused her demise. So that is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. Now I'm going to the most, I got a pair of books that are troubling, challenging, but really important books that in American literature that also are full of ghosts. First of all, we have Beloved by Toni Morrison. Now this is an iconic American novel, and Beloved was published in, drum roll, 1987, and I read it shortly thereafter in I think I read it in a graduate English class, and it was a fairly new book at that time, but it is a historical novel. And in this book we have a woman named Sethe who lives in Cincinnati with her adult daughter, but and she lives, it's in the post-slavery era. She was previously a slave, and she has very upsetting memories of her time before, when she was trying to escape. And she has some other children. One, her daughter Denver was born when she was in the process of trying to escape. And then she has two sons, and then there was another baby. And we learn more about this baby as the story unfolds. And this baby is presumably haunting her house. The opening of Beloved is one of the best openings, in my opinion, in literature. There's certain books that I just love the beginning, like the book just hits me at the very start, and this is one of my favorite openings. So I'm going to share it now. 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. The women in the house knew it, and so did the children. For years, each put up with the spite in his own way, but by 1873, Sethe and her daughter Denver were its only victims. The grandmother, baby Suggs, was dead, and the sons, Howard and Bugler, had run away by the time they were 13 years old. As soon as merely looking in a mirror shattered it, that was the signal for Bugler. As soon as two tiny handprints appeared in the cake, that was it for Howard. Neither boy waited to see more. Another kettle full of chickpeas smoking in a heap on the floor, soda crackers crumbled and strewn in a line next to the door sill. Nor did they wait for one of the relief periods, the weeks, months even, when nothing was disturbed. No, each one fled at once the moment the house committed what was for him the one insult, not to be born or witnessed a second time. So that sets the tone for a very unsettling house. And as the story unfolds, Sethe is reuniting with an old friend, Paul D., from her days on the plantation, who becomes a new man in her life. But at the same time, a young girl turns up at their home named Beloved, and it becomes clear through the course of the book that she is the embodiment of the dead baby in an adult form. Now, this sounds really weird when I try to describe it, but you have to just read it, and I can't tell you too much about it because, again, things from the past are revealed gradually as the story in the 1870s is rolling along, and then she's remembering what happened previously. And she's haunted literally in this book, but it's also about it's about the American legacy of slavery and brutality and what kind of devastation that has wrought on actual people and their descendants. So Beloved is a beautifully haunted novel that I need to read again. And a book that has some similar emotional heft and is haunted in a similar way but in a different time period is the next one I want to mention, which is Sing, Unburied, Sing by Jessmyn Ward. This book was published in 2017, and it takes place in Mississippi. And it's a contemporary story, but again, we have the legacy of violence in the South, racism, brutality, and then also more contemporary problems such as addiction. And in this story, we have a most horrendous road trip. This is like one of the worst road trips of all of American literature. And the road trip is on the occasion of Leonie and her two children, Jojo and Kayla, going on a long drive to retrieve Michael, Leonie's partner, from prison. They take Misty along with them, who is Leonie's kind of partner. She's their co-worker, but they're also partners in crime in drug use and drug dealing. They make some drug dealing business stops along the way. Kayla, the toddler, is sick the whole way and constantly throwing up. Jojo, the 13-year-old who's basically raising Kayla, is also along for the ride, trying to take care of her, worrying about his mother, his father, the situation in the car, the poor decisions made by these adults. And then, as if all that wasn't bad enough, they pick up an extra passenger when they pick up Michael, which is Richie, a ghost from Jojo's grandfather's past. So that's not the only ghost in the book, though. The ghost of Richie is important because Pop has not told the whole story about what happened between him and Richie back when Pop was also a prisoner at the same prison. And another important ghost in the book is Given, who is Leonie's brother, and she only sees him when she's high. So these different ghosts are there for different reasons, and their messages are not always entirely clear, but they do seem to have something that they want to say. But just the whole notion of this crowded car, poor Jojo, who is trying to figure out how to grow up and become a responsible man in the midst of this chaos. Leonie, who's consumed by her love for Michael and completely neglects her children. Poor little Kayla's just sick as she can be. And then there's a ghost of some dead kid from decades before crowding up with them in the back seat. So this book is, it's dark, it's sad, it's tragic, but it's so, so good. And I highly recommend it, ghosts and all. So anyway, that wraps it up. I hope you found something fun that you haven't read before in this list. And let me know in the comments below your favorite books with ghosts in them. But I'm going to stop for now. And I hope that you have a fantastically not too haunted day. And I will be back soon. Bye.